Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you and Brooke and Malcolm and everybody responsible for this conference. It's an incredibly important subject, as all of you know, because you're here. I wanted to just briefly this morning touch on some of the issues that I think are critical in understanding really the threats that the United States and some of its friends and allies around the world face because of lawfare and its various ramifications. And I think the most important point to understand right at the outset, because America is a law-abiding society, we believe in the rule of law. When somebody uses the word law, for us it has real sit-up-and-take-notice force. The trouble with much of what passes now under the guise of international law is that it has next to nothing to do with real law. It has been created through the facile use of domestic constitutional law creation transmuted into the international context with no basis. And that's why I think that it's important to attack this entire phenomenon conceptually, because once you get into the language of accepting much of this as law, we're immediately at a disadvantage for the reason that we all are a rule of law society. I just don't see that much of this has the fundamental democratic consent, from us at least, that gives it any right to parade under the guise of being law, or therefore have any binding force on us. And let me just take three examples which I think are critical in allowing the United States and the West in general to defend itself, not only in the context of terrorism, but in the broader context as well. The first arose in the late 1990s in consideration of NATO's air attack against Serbia for its conduct in Kosovo. It was clear that Russia would veto any effort at a Security Council resolution that purported to give authority to NATO. So all those unilateralist cowboys in the Clinton administration decided that they would do it anyway. This provoked then Secretary General Kofi Annan to complain that the Security Council had been displaced as what he called, and I quote, the sole source of legitimacy, the sole source of legitimacy for the international use of force. Now, that leaves out the UN Charter itself, which provides for the inherent right of individual and collective self-defense. But what Annan was saying is something that is widely believed in international law circles, widely believed in governing elites in Europe, and widely used around the world fundamentally to constrain the United States. And that is that without Security Council authorization, the use of force is illegitimate. Now, it's bad enough politically, but as Ruth Wedgwood correctly pointed out in her last answer, as the parties to the Rome Statute begin to consider the definition of the definition of the crime of aggression, the issue of Security Council authorization can become incredibly important. So I think it's very important for the United States particularly to say unequivocally that we recognize no authority in this world, in the temporal world, higher than the U.S. Constitution. The only authority the United States needs, the only authority we need is for our representative government to carry out its functions pursuant to our Constitution. That makes our actions in our own self-defense lawful. We will obviously debate domestically exactly how that plays out. But there is no international permission required for the United States to defend ourselves. There is no mother may I that we have to play if we follow our own constitutional authority. And I say that without equivocation. I don't want to debate nuances about that. There aren't any nuances in this issue. We decide, if we decide legitimately under our authority, we're a legitimate end of discussion. Second point, exemplified by The recent Goldstone report about Operation Cast Lead in the Gaza Strip, I'm sure you've heard about that earlier. There's a lot wrong with that report. Let me just take one point, and that is the conclusion that fundamentally Israel responded with disproportionate force in its conduct of cast lead. Now, this is something that Israel is regularly accused of. It was accused of that in the 2006 war against Hezbollah. It's vitally important for the United States to reject this, again, facile analogy to the law of just war. Let me be very clear here when it comes to disproportionate force. I believe in disproportionate force. I do not believe in having a fair fight. I believe the United States should have what the military people call full spectrum dominance. We should be dominant in every aspect of warfare, unequivocally. And when we have a necessity for military engagement, we should decide at our option to use punishing, crippling, dispositive military force without second guessing by anybody else. Once somebody can second guess your use of force, you no longer have an inherent right of individual or collective self-defense. I used to try and explain defending Israel's right to self-defense in the 2006 war against Hezbollah, that these arguments about disproportionate use of force, if applied to the United States in World War II, would have meant that after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States would have been entitled to destroy a comparable number of Japanese capital ships as was sunk at Pearl Harbor, and that after that we would have had to have stopped. Self-defense means not simply responding to the proximate attack, it means the right to eliminate the source of danger. You may choose not to do that, but it is within your right of self-defense to do it if you want to. And that's why, among other reasons, the Goldstone report is so fraught with danger for the United States and the West as a whole. And then finally, just yesterday, in classic example of good timing, Manfred Novak, the omnipresent UN rapporteur on torture, delivered his report to the UN Human Rights Council, not the thing Ruth serves on, but a different body, where he basically said that he criticized the Obama administration for not prosecuting officials of the Bush administration who were engaged in the apprehension, detention of terrorist suspects, and under his definition, torture. Now, without getting into the specifics of this turgid report that he has yet again produced, basically what he's challenging is the right of the United States to engage in espionage. It's obviously a more complex debate for that, but that's fundamentally what it comes down to, because he says that if you look at actions that U.S. agents undertook, they violated our laws, they violated other national laws, and they violated international law. Well, of course they did. That's what espionage is. It involves inducing people to commit treason against their own government. It involves bribing people. It involves stealing things, including intellectual property. It involves coercion and the use of force to achieve our objectives. I fundamentally believe that the United States has a right to engage in espionage with the agents carrying out controlled by American law. Nobody's arguing that American intelligence agents, any more than American military forces, can do whatever they want. They are limited and should be limited according to our law and our training and our doctrine. Underline the word "our" in every case, not by rapporteurs of the UN Human Rights Council. So these are the sorts of examples, of which there are thousands more we could go into, that reinforce to me why we have to establish the right conceptual framework before we proceed with this debate. And that conceptual framework, as I said at the beginning, is that the controlling authority for the United States is our Constitution. If other countries want to subordinate themselves to international law, be my guest, but don't look in our direction. Thank you very much.